When Sarah shoved the barn door wide, wood screamed against rusted hinges, and a column of light carved through decades of dust, illuminating rows of canvas-draped shapes that were too tall, too deliberate, too numerous to be farm equipment. Her breath caught. One hand braced her swollen belly, the other reached for the nearest tarp, and in a single pull she revealed a portrait in a gilded frame, colors still alive as if the paint were drying. Tag after brittle tag showed the same precise handwriting, Elizabeth's. Her great-aunt who had died quietly and left Sarah a leaning farmhouse, 40 acres, and a mystery. She had driven 3 hours to start over after losing Tom to a drunk driver. This was supposed to be sorrow's quiet, not a vault. But the barn was a museum built in secret. Crates stamped in foreign languages, marble that held the rooms cold, filing cabinets with alphabetical folders. A leather journal lay on a scarred desk, its first entry dated shortly after the war, recovered pieces, shattered families, names becoming numbers because someone needed to remember them as names. Outside, the gravel drive lay empty. Inside, the air tasted like old paper and oil paint. In the far distance, beyond a ripple of fields, a silhouette shifted at the tree line, watching. She closed the journal, felt the baby kick, and understood the sick gravity. This wasn't an inheritance. It was responsibility measured in lives, not appraisals. And responsibility draws attention. The kind you can hear long after the door stops screaming. By dusk, the farmhouse had inhaled her. Open windows, clean air, quilt smoothed flat by tired hands. The neighbor arrived first, a tall, spare man with a walking stick and eyes the color of winter sky. "Peterson," he said, setting down a casserole the way people do when words are heavy. He looked past Sarah toward the barn as if it were a fire. Elizabeth chose carefully. Chose what, he wouldn't say. After he left, the house whispered like all old houses do, and when metal clinked outside, Sarah froze halfway up the stairs. A flicker in the barn blinked and vanished. In daylight she found the key, iron, oversized, waiting in a kitchen drawer, like it knew its turn was coming. The padlock surrendered with a single, satisfying click, and this time she entered fully. Paintings stored upright on racks. Shelves of small bronzes and porcelain. Every item carried an inventory number that matched neat entries in Elizabeth's journal. Places, dates, owners, losses. Her great-aunt hadn't been hiding spoils. She had been hiding proof. Hamburg Linz, a salt mine in Austria. Pencil notations about families who vanished, about heirs who might still be searching. Someday, someone must know. Elizabeth had written with a steadiness that could only come from purpose. Sarah read until the light slanted and the floor turned to shadows, then locked everything. Knowing the lock was theater if someone truly wanted in. She did what grief and duty demand in the internet age. She searched. Within minutes, she found a portrait nearly identical to the one in her phone, listed on a Nazi-looted art database as missing since 1943, the heirs still seeking answers. When the local appraiser, Marcus, stepped into the barn, his professionalism fractured. He named artists as if reciting a prayer, a workshop piece with a vanished provenance, a small Giacometti, a Degas, a Klimt sketch. His hands trembled because this wasn't value. It was history burning through paper. "Some of these have been hunted for 80 years, he said. And then he told her everything the internet had only hinted, the restitution laws. The museums terrified of tainted provenance. The families waiting for calls that never come. "You're in the middle of something huge," he warned, glancing to the open door the way a sailor glances at the horizon. Out by the tree line, Peterson watched again, binoculars up, a sentinel or a judge. That night the first email arrived, from a New York dealer who somehow already knew about the collection. Polite language, urgent tone, discreet arrangements. No questions asked. Another message followed. Fewer polite words, more money, same pressure. Sarah closed the laptop with a quiet that wasn't peace. The barn's padlock felt smaller now, her phone heavier. In the journal's last pages, Elizabeth had written, "The keeper must become the revealer." Sarah felt the baby turn, and she understood the deadline beating under her ribs. Answers arrived with a past she never knew she owned. Her mother drove in, face pinched by things unsaid, and confessed what assimilation had sanded down. They were Jewish. The Weiss family had fled Vienna in 1938. Not everyone made it out. In the study, a panel clicked open to a hidden compartment. Yellowed identity cards, German documents, a silver locket. Inside the locket, a photograph of Elizabeth smiling at a man in a Nazi uniform. Intimacy in their angle that made Emma, Sarah's sister, spit the word collaborator like a curse. But the journal told a different story. Coded notes, transport manifest secured, safe house prepared, ledger copied. When the knock came, it was measured, expensive. A man in a dark coat held a card that gleamed with the Foundation's name, that tasted like money and museums. Reichman. "I believe you have something that belongs to my family," he said through the door. Sarah didn't open it. "Bring documentation," she answered, watching his reflection in the rain-sheened window as he tucked his smile away. Peterson appeared at twilight with a different vocabulary. "Guardians," he said, eyes on the horizon. Not many left. He described a network that watched this place because some things, proof, memory, truth, require sentries. An anonymous letter arrived, short and sharp as a blade. "Bury the past, for your child's sake." The barn's motion sensor chimed after midnight, and by the time the sheriff's cruiser washed the yard in red-blue, the would-be intruder was gone, leaving scratch marks around the lock, like a signature. The world knew, and now it was coming closer. Dr. Abigail Cohen walked into the barn the next morning with the calm of someone who had spent a career facing hard rooms. She traced her fingers over Elizabeth's inventory tags, called out the names of families as if she were reuniting friends, and explained in a low, precise voice how unofficial networks had formed after the war. Survivors, curators, soldiers, people who pulled art out of mines and castles and the black market, then preserved it until heirs could be found. "Your aunt wasn't hoarding," Cohen said. "She was safeguarding." A crate of records turned out to be records, vinyl, Bach and Schubert hiding testimonies in secret grooves. Voices cracking as they described forced sales, midnight seizures, exit visas purchased with heritage. One voice shaped Emma and Sarah's shared silence. Their grandfather, thought dead in transit, naming what had been taken from his family's gallery days before he vanished. Sheriff Brennan returned that night, flashlight haloed, and confessed a lineage of his own. His grandfather had been part of the same network. He had left letters for Elizabeth's successor. He handed Sarah a weathered envelope thick with aliases and permits, photographs of Elizabeth beside a different man, the one from the locket, now revealed as a counterintelligence officer embedded among art dealers. "They saved what they could, documented what they couldn't," Brennan said. And behind the rolling chalkboard they found a map stabbed with pins, museums, estates, safe houses, one note underlined twice, KB, false wall, priority. The panel slid open to reveal the smallest, heaviest cache, ledgers with signatures that still scorched, lists that connected theft to murder with the bureaucrat's ruinous neatness. Reichman escalated the way money does, by pretending to help. 8 figures, no questions asked, a bouquet that smelled like ownership, and a letter dressed up as kindness, accept peace for your child. Cohen called moments later with a different kind of news. The menorah Sarah had photographed, the one with filigree-like captured light, belonged to the Brodsky family, and the officer who orchestrated its seizure had been Heinrich Reichman, Dominik's grandfather. Sarah's DNA results arrived like fate showing receipts. Her matches included surnames she had just read in Elizabeth's notes: Brodsky, Stern, Lowenstein, third and fourth cousins whose absence had been carefully engineered. When Dominic filed for an emergency injunction to protect the collection, cameras bloomed like algae on the courthouse steps. Inside, his attorneys invoked conservation and stewardship. But Sarah's counsel answered with photographs, ledgers, affidavits from restitution scholars, and a USB drive. Scans of Hinrich's personal records finally pried into daylight. The judge denied the injunction and ordered a neutral conservation assessment under court supervision. No item to leave the property. In the hallway, Sarah caught her breath as a contraction folded her in half. She was at 33 weeks, running on tea and adrenaline, and felt the baby answer the gavel with a foot. Stress tipped the balance. Hours later, hospital ceilings strobed past as Sarah counted breaths and bargains. Emma said all the right sister things. The nurses said all the right nurse things. The doctor said, "She's early but strong." In the pause between contractions, a deputy texted that unmarked vans were idling near the farm. Sarah pictured the barn's door, pictured the iron key, pictured Elizabeth's calm handwriting, and felt a fierce, clean thread pull tight inside her. When her daughter arrived, small, furious, perfect, the world in her chest rearranged itself, making room for a future that needed truth as much as it needed sleep. 3 days later, against advice dressed as compassion, Sarah went home. Dominic had beaten the calendar and arrived with a conservation team and forged paperwork that said now. Brennan met them in the yard with a patience that kept men from making mistakes. Peterson stepped from the barn with Dr. Cohen and Joseph, the quiet elder from the consortium, each carrying a folder that cut truer than any blade. "Leave," Sarah said, voice low, baby strapped against her heart, silver bracelet winking with a crest that matched the old key. She spoke of a safe deposit box in Zurich and the records Hinrich had locked away in 1944. Dominic's color slipped. His confidence belongs in museums too, Sarah thought behind glass. They packed their equipment like men gathering a retreat. What began as a secret became a headline that refused to lie. The Swiss bank opened the box because keys and time make strange allies. And Heinrich's meticulous hand betrayed him at last. Orders bearing his signature. Special handling instructions for problematic Jewish collections. Lists that lined up with Elizabeth's journal like puzzle pieces tired of pretending they don't fit. The Foundation issued statements about shock and stewardship. Governments and museums issued inquiries. Dominic issued silence and then resignations. The exhibition was inevitable, not the triumphant kind that primes you for champagne, but the quiet, reverent kind that asks you to show up with your whole heart. The Elizabeth Weiss collection, Art, Memory, Justice, filled a gallery with paintings and objects that felt heavier than their materials. Every plaque told 2 stories, who made it and who almost lost it forever. Survivors touched glass with trembling fingers. Granddaughters mouthed the names their grandparents whispered against exile. Emma hovered near a representative from the Holocaust Memorial Museum, trading emails and next steps. Sheriff Brennan stood in a suit that didn't know him yet, awkward and proud in equal measure. Peterson stayed home, but his name was printed large where it mattered. By summer, the barn had been reborn as the Weiss-Brodsky Center for Art Restitution and Holocaust Memory. Climate control humming like a vow. The return tally climbed past 60. Each reunion wrote another line in a journal Sarah kept for her daughter, who toddled between cases with serious eyes and an outstretched hand that seemed to know what belonged where. Rachel Brodsky moved into a small cottage on the property, bringing boxes of research and a stubborn tenderness that made the farmhouse feel like a home built on purpose, not accident. Sarah's book arrived, The Network, part history, part testimony, part love letter to courage, and pre-orders turned into conversations that turned into names that turned into matches. The Vienna Museum called about 3 Weiss Gallery paintings in private hands, willing to negotiate. The database pinged with an Argentinian family, recognizing their grandmother's candelabra from the online catalog. The sheriff brought paperwork confirming the foundation's concession to external audits and open restitution pipelines. None of it felt like victory exactly. It felt like gravity doing its job at last. And so the story ends where it was always headed, with truth in the light and a future that remembers. If you felt that journey, the barn opening, the names returning, the daughter arriving early to a fight that started before she was born, stay with us. Like this video so the algorithm knows these stories matter. Comment with the part that stayed in your chest, the vinyl voices, the map behind the chalkboard, the ledger that finally spoke, the moment a survivor saw a lost piece again. Share this with one person who loves art, history, or justice. Subscribe and turn on notifications because next week we're visiting another hidden room, another ledger, another family waiting for their history to come home. Until then, remember, some treasures aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to find their way back. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open the door.